I think we should start thinking about those. I think my goal with this was to do all of 2017, but I think we just didn't have enough bandwidth in that meeting to do it. So maybe I will start another tab and change this one to just 1.6 planning, and we can start, slowly. I think it makes sense to just gather ideas, even if we don't prioritize them or anything until next quarter.
So the one thing I am kind of curious about is line 19, the containerized mounts to GA.
Yes.
That it feels to me like a big feature. I know that there was this like last second 1.5 push to get something done on GKI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something we need to call out as a feature? I mean, I feel like we're going from a not alpha to GA in one release.
Yes, we should call it out as a feature. Yep, agreed.
It, like, affects tons of people and is a pretty big interface. Lots of people are eventually to use. So
yeah.
I made my guys, as we can see, sign up for review.
Nice. Okay, let us update that and put it, that'll be part of the 1.6 milestone. And one more item that I remembered was that we have default storage classes for cloud providers. The code for this has already been checked in, but we need to make sure that it is communicated widely that this is changing fundamental behavior in the storage stack. In particular, it used to be that on GCE and Amazon, if you created a persistent volume claim, it would bind to existing persistent volume objects. But with these storage classes that now get installed by default on both of these cloud providers, it will result in automatic dynamic provisioning of new volumes, new PVs, instead of binding with existing PVs. So this is a fundamental change that needs to be very widely communicated. It also, I'm not sure that the experience for being able to disable this behavior is what we want at the moment. Right now, it's a add-on YAML file, cluster add-on YAML file that is on the master. And so if you want to disable this feature, you have to go and modify that file. Especially for clusters where you may not have access to the master, this seems like a very poor user experience. So this is probably something that we want to improve before this goes out with 1.6. I think there's a bug opened tracking this issue. I'll see if I could dig that up and add it in there as well. But I want to make sure that's tracked in the spreadsheet too.
Question on the on number 4, external provisioner. Is there a plan to host? Where are the external provisioners going to be hosted in the repo, going further beyond the incubator?
Brad?
That's a good question. It's also a big agenda item we have on for the end. I mean, let's move it up to right now, I guess. So we have about 4 or 5 external provisioners that are in the pipeline, and we've got them pretty much finished, but we don't have a home for them. The current breakdown of the NFS external provisioner that we're using is kind of our reference implementation. The repo name is NFS provisioner, so that's not really a good generic place to hold external provisioners. And we would like to break it out into a very distinct library and potentially have a different repo where we host external provisioners, but we wanted to bring it to the SIG and see what everybody else thought. Where should these things live at?
I mean, it feels to me like we have, well, infinite choices, but 2 reasonable choices would be an entire repo just for a Golang or potentially other language helper library. As we mentioned, the NFS provisioner has a whole bunch of Golang library code and then the actual NFS provisioner. So we could make the library its own repo that gets vendored into individual provisioners. We could just make an external provisioners repo that has the library in it and a bunch of provisioners. I don't know what people like better. I sort of like the one repo idea that has the library as just a part of that one repo, and we have a bunch of provisioners in that repo. But I don't know how much that helps us, help others.
If you have all the provisioners in that repo, does it mean that a vendor writing a new provisioner has to go through a code review process and go through committing to this repo?
I would imagine if they wanted the community to help them maintain their provisioner, then yes. But people who wanted to do it entirely on their own would just make use of the library portion of this repo and maintain the code themselves wherever they wanted
it. And to be clear, the external provisioner is not a flex provisioner, right? A flex provider.
No.
So the external provisioner also is supposed to be deployed as a pod, right? Not necessarily be vendored in somebody else's code.
There's a library piece of it that works for vendoring in, but yes, it could run as a pod. It could run as a standalone executable. The idea is that we have like a controller piece that could act as a library, and then it calls out when it sees an event that needs to be provisioned for. So it simplifies the coding up of an external provisioner. You just have to basically write a provision method, and you get the remainder of the library for free.
Ah, okay.
And what the stuff that we have in the pipeline is around Manila in different publicly available file system types that we thought others might find useful. These aren't necessarily proprietary file systems that we're wanting to put out there. It's just stuff we thought other people might want to share, and then also the library piece of it.
Yeah. So there's kind of two parts, right? There's this library that we think that lots of people writing external provisioners will want to be able to make use of. And then there are actual external provisioners that we would like to make available in the community. And there's this question of, should those two pieces be arranged in repositories completely separately, or should we just kind of mush the library and public open source community driven external provisioners all in one repository? I don't know if I have a strong opinion.
I mean, aside from the common code that the helper code to create an external provisioner, the facility or the features of an external provisioner is basically vendor provided. So I don't see that being any different than something like being used as a flex, where we're not asking people to, we're not creating a flex repo. We just, we depend on the vendor to provide their code and trust that it works.
Well, I guess the point is that there are provisioners that are maintained by the community, and there are provisioners that are maintained by vendors. And I guess the question is about those that are maintained by community right now.
Yes. So the idea is for certain infrastructure like the Amazon EFS, that is a facility that most people will like to use. So maintaining a community-supported repo would be much beneficial than each vendor implement their own.
So I think the key takeaway is that even if we have a repository for these external provisioners, it's not necessary for vendors to use that repository. It's just a nice place to be able to share code, libraries, and for any common community maintained provisioners, they could be maintained there. So it's not a requirement, it's just nice to have.
Yeah, one comment on that is if we can separate out the library part, because right now we have a POC where we vendor in the entire NFS provisioner and we just use a controller. So if you can separate that out, that'll be great.
I think that's the plan, right, Brad?
Yes, that's what we're working towards.
And another question is whether the Flex and further down the road CVI, is it going to be yet another repository, or we're talking common repository for the storage management that's out of the tree?
That's a good question. If we want to future-proof it, we should call this repository storage plugins for Kubernetes or something generic instead of being provisioner specific. Provisioner is just the first step to getting out of tree.
I mean, it seems like there would be no objection, I think, to creating a Kubernetes /storage repo, put all the stuff in there. If we decide we need more repos, then we can make the case, and I think people would be open to that. It feels like making the case in advance is just front-loading work.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Brad, do you want to take on this responsibility of setting up the new repo?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I like the Kubernetes /storage idea, and then we could have subdirectories starting off with just provisioner and then add in more as we need. Okay, and I'm going to look at probably renaming the NFS provisioner to this, so we don't have NFS provisioner. We'll just house that in the same repo. Okay. All right, any other comments on this? All right, let's move on. So next comment is just a reminder again that all 1.6 features should have a design doc. And in addition to that, something me and Aaron have really been trying to hammer is testing. Let's make this part of the process instead of something that we think about after the fact. Right now, Aaron and I are planning on going through the bugs that we had in Q4 of last year and seeing if we could get a list of new tests that we can add to ensure that we could prevent regressions in the future for those bugs. But to prevent this kind of thing, let's start being more proactive about testing. So one of the steps towards that is, along with your design docs, could you please also create a test plan doc to identify what kinds of testing is required before you start development? And that way, your features that you deliver should also include tests along with the code, or have the test written before the code. We want to get out of this cycle of like, yeah, we'll write tests later, which never happens, and it becomes very difficult to maintain the code. In addition to that, sorry, did you want to add something?
I was just going to add, Saad, sorry I joined late, that if people are questioning what needs to be added to that or need examples, I mean, feel free to reach out to myself, John Cope, Jeff Vance, or Saad. We can help point you in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So final item there is to keep an eye on what the deadlines are for this milestone for 1.6. Important deadlines to remember are this coming Tuesday, January 24, is the features repo freeze. So please make sure if there's any features that are going in to 1.6 that they're populated in that features repo. And the next date to remember will be February 27, which is a Monday, and that will be the feature complete date. That's when code freeze goes into effect. So any code that you want to be part of 1.6 should be completed by then. So a little bit more than a month left for coding. Next up, we have NetApps. What's going on here? NetApps Provisioner. Ardalan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is just a quick announcement that NetApp released its external provisioner a few weeks ago. I talked about our design in the first two face-to-face SIG meetings. So it's a out-of-tree, out-of-process external provisioner that works very similar to the NFS provisioner that Red Hat developed. It doesn't rely on the Flex plugin API. And one of the cool things about it is that a single instance of the provisioner can support different backends across different storage platforms. And we've also experimented with some NetApp storage, and it worked fine. So if it's of interest to you guys, you can check it out and see how you can integrate it with your storage systems. And you have the link. It's github.com/NetApp-Trident. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us.
Nice. Thanks, Ardalan. Anybody have questions for him?
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Hua Min, you have out-of-tree provisioner repo hosting. I think we started talking about this.
Yeah, I think that is already addressed. You can skip this one.
Okay. Nobody signed up for any design reviews today, so keep in mind in the future there is time for doing design reviews. Feel free to add that to the agenda whenever you want to. And there are a couple PRs that folks added that need attention. One in particular, 39535, added by Portworx, and it looks like it's the Portworx volume plugin. Very cool. I will assign myself and rootfs to take a look at that. Anybody else that may be interested in it, please feel free to jump in. And Aditya, do you have any comments on that PR? Or?
I'm just waiting. It needs a rebase though, but I was just waiting if I have any more comments. If I get any comments, I would fix those and then
rebase.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll try to get. We'll try to take a look at that. And Vlad from Dell EMC posted about 3938924.
Yeah, rootfs started to look at that about a week ago. I went back and did some work, and I just need a pair of eyes to look at it again. I think it's at some point it's testing needs to be enabled. I think it's still not enabled yet.
Gotcha. And is rootfs still the person who should be taking
as far as I know, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
He had some suggestions from last review, and I got those taken care of, and some more. So. And just to be clear, we're talking about features being added and design dot, et cetera. Does that apply to this sort of work, or we're talking about
volume plugins? Technically, yes. That is a very good point. Volume plugins are considered new features, so they should have a features repo entry. So both Portworx and this Scale.io volume plugin should both have an entry in the features repo. The reason for this is because there are associated document changes and things that go along with the release notes that need to be tracked. And so if the feature exists in the feature repo, all that stuff gets tracked. If it doesn't exist, then it won't. So please make sure to have an entry in the features repo as an issue, and make sure that issue has the 1.6 milestone label on there, and mark it yourself as the owner and the SIG storage as the SIG that's backing it.
Okay, so create an issue in the feature repo to track it. Got it.
Okay.
One last question. You know, with every rebase, there's every now and then there's changes in the upstream API. What's the best way to kind of get ahead of that?
Stay on top of that. Yeah, that's tough unless you're tracking all the PRs that are flowing through.
Right, exactly. I mean, I don't mind doing the rebate, doing it during the rebates. I thought maybe there was somewhere to go, like an issue somewhere that kind of announces it.
We don't have any good mechanism right now for tracking the internal volume API changes. Maybe we should, but at the moment we don't.
Okay. Well, it's not just the volume API change. I'm talking about, like, you know, just the higher level API stuff, like object meta.
Okay. That shouldn't happen too frequently. I think the last big one was from at the end of 1.5 when they made a big refactor. Clayton and Chow.
Yeah, I just did a rebase, and it seemed like some of the stuff is moving into the API machinery packaging.
Yes, that happened at the end of 1.5, beginning of 1.6, and I think there was communication sent out about that change. So that kind of change usually gets communicated out on Kubernetes Dev.
Okay, all right.
So that would probably be the best place to keep track of that.
Awesome, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, looks like that is all we have on the agenda for today. Anybody else want to add anything?
Hey, Saad, this is Clint from Dell EMC.
Hey, Clint.
Hey there. Just want to make sure to call out that on the email group, I added a discussion thread around CVI CSI. So if anybody has some time to take a look and has any comments following up from our November meetup that we had, that'd be great to start some discussions there.
Cool, thanks. Speaking of face-to-face meetups, do we want to talk about when we want to have our next one?
Sure, that sounds like a good idea. And I think I mentioned it before. This is Steve Wong with Dell EMC, but we'd be pleased to host the next one in Santa Clara if that's of interest.
I think that would work nicely for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I like Santa Clara.
No one is interested in Florida?
Always a good excuse to go out to Florida.
Is that the office in Florida?
Yeah. If not, we'll make one.
In terms of timing, what were we folks thinking? I know end of March is, I think, what we, end of Q1, early Q2 is what we were initially thinking about. End of Q1, which is end of March, is KubeCon Berlin. So I think folks will be out for that. But maybe sometime in April.
I don't have my calendar open, but I've no objection tentatively.
Okay.
Yeah, April seems good.
So let's say sometime in April, tentatively in Santa Clara. And as it gets closer, we can figure out the details and the exact dates. All right, folks, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any other comments? All right, we'll call it. Take care.
Thanks, Saad.
Mm.